Okay, round two, let's go. All right, so where did we stop off a little bit ago? We stopped with, we had just done a little bit of the background on what's going on with the hotel business. Now let's talk about the stuff actually happening within the hotel. How does food and bev work? How does room division work? Let's figure that out. All right, so food and bev, they do a lot. They do a lot of stuff because it is not only feeding whoever comes into that bakery. It is not only feeding whoever comes into that restaurant or to that lounge. It is taking care of weddings. It is being able to feed hundreds of people at conferences. It is being able to deal with banquets. It's able to deal with the mini bars, the room service, the kitchen, the catering, the loungers, the stewarding. It's a little bit of everything, and it is so much. So especially at high-end hotels, food and bev management is key. About 20% of a hotel's operating profit comes from this food and bev. All right, so let's think about like what are the different departments, because we have a lot, right? We have mini fridges, we have room service, we have banquets, we have meeting spaces, we have lounges, we have, oh my goodness. So let's think about it. Okay. I'm gonna have a lot of words for you. Don't panic. We're going to learn a lot of definitions today, but they're kind of so that you understand the flavor of how hotels go, right? So the first, let's think about the kitchen, because there's a kitchen somewhere. Okay, except for 1 and 2 star hotels, we're not going to talk about them again until we get to room division. Go ahead and throw them to the side. When we're thinking about kitchen, most kitchens that are within hotel and lodging have an executive chef. The executive chef and the kitchen manager, so we technically have back of house and front of house. These report directly to the food and bev director, who's all over all these different areas, right? The executive chef is responsible for efficient kitchen operations. This means that they need to exceed guest expectations on quality, temperature, presentation, portion size, for banquets, for conferences, for dealing with dietary restrictions, for dealing with room service and everything in between. All right. Then there's food outlets. So we do have these kitchens, but every now and then we'll also have food outlets. These are things such as like the coffee shop that you'll have within a hotel, right? These are dinings that operate within the hotel or conference center. So why is there a Starbucks in your Marriott? Because it is a food outlet. These can have some sort of signature and upscale restaurant. They're technically their own thing, but they pay a fee to be able to have that spot to the restaurant. These can include everything from casual coffee to sort of a lobby bar or other shop. And then we have bar operations. So lots of people who are traveling for work or business or leisure or anything else like that, they typically don't take their car with them, which means that they don't want to drive to be able to go afford amenities. And Uber and Lyft are really a thing of the past 10 years, right? But hotels are older than that. There's a lot of bars in lodging. A lot of the time, high-end restaurants have lounges that might have some sort of live music or local entertainment or something so that guests, especially late night guests, can have a place to socialize that's not within their hotel rooms. So these may be standalone bars. They might operate as sort of like a well where you can just sort of come up, ask for a drink, and then walk away. They might be themed, they might be poolside, but there's lots of different bar operations. One of the reasons why hotels like bars is because let's think about a kitchen. If you don't have as many guests as you expected, your food will go bad and you can't sell it the next day. If you don't have as many people as you wanted at a bar, your product is shelf stable. For the most part, you can put it back up on the shelf until the point where you do have the customers. So you end up having a 75 to 80% profit margin on alcohol while only having a 3 to 15% profit margin on things in the kitchen. It's just much more profitable. Which is why a lot of hotels have this as sort of a thing, because it's also something that can be relatively shelf stable that can deal with changes in volume of occupancy. All right. Then we have something called the stewarding department. The chief steward reports to the food and beverage manager. They're responsible for a lot of the way that things start to run in the back of the house, right? Cleanliness in the back of the house, making sure that the dishes and the glassware and the china and the cutlery are beautiful and exemplary by having good inventory systems. They maintain the inventory controls, making sure that there's enough napkins, enough linens, enough chairs, enough of different ordering so that there's strict inventory. They maintain dishwashing machines, pest control, extermination, and they forecast what we need for different sorts of cleaning supplies. The stewarding department is actually a lot of how all these different food and bev related operations are able to operate, is because they have that centralized person who's dealing with a lot of those more fluid pieces, such as like cleanliness, right? There's also typically a catering department. So if we're looking at something that is a class or a 3-star or above hotel, and some 2-star hotels, they probably have conferences and meetings there. A lot of the time you go to your hotel and you're wondering, why is everybody walking around in suits? It's because there's probably a conference going on. Or why is everybody dressed like an anime character? There's probably a convention going on, right? So those people need to eat, especially at formal things that might be happening, such as a plated dinner. So catering departments have both sort of a sales thing. They work with these different events coming in to figure out like the planning for the event. They also have a banquet team that actually executes that plan day of. So they'll sell, or they'll, let's say it's an anime convention, right? Dragon Con in Atlanta. It's a lot of fun. Try to go sometime. I don't know what Pittsburgh has. I got to figure that out. I'm pretty sure they have. If you know, email me because I would like to know what's here. But let's think about the sales for this, right? So we know that we're going to have 19,000 people who are going to be hot, sweaty, in a bad mood, and want food, right? And we need to feed them. So let's think about what we might be able to sell to that customer, the people who are putting on this convention. We might be able to say, okay, well, I know that we're not gonna have time for everybody to do a plated dinner because there's so many different things people are. Maybe we'll have a plated dinner for this, maybe the advisory council or some group members who pay for an extra amount, but we also need other types of food. So let's have food trucks set up. Let's have a stall set up along major thoroughfares. Let's have a funnel cake area for people to be able to purchase funnel cakes. Thinking about what things need to be hosted and going at the time. And then on the day of, there's going to be a list of things needed, and the banquet team is going to take care of it. And they're going to have those things moving, and they're going to put out the plates, and they're going to put out all of the food, and they're going to put out all these different sorts of things on the day of the event. So there's lots of positions within this department. First is the director of sales, then there's the catering sales manager, and then there's the banquet manager. Director of sales, first person who talks to this sort of customer and starts to work through things. Catering sales manager, thinking about what can actually be done in these sales, right? And catering for large groups. Banquet manager, putting stuff together and getting it going, right? And this brings us to the banquet event order. So it's called a BEO. Sometimes you'll hear it called a CEO. I don't like that. It's too confusing, but a BEO. So this is something that you're going to hear a lot in this class. And a banquet event form is, or event order, this is just basically the game plan for that event, right? It looks something like this. And we've actually gotten to the point of technology, so most people will get it like on their iPads and stuff like that, or in their email, but it actually is also a physical sheet of paper handed to somebody. It tells you what time you need to leave, what time the crew needs to be there. It tells you what all's on the menu. It tells you everything that we need to have in stock. It tells you how many of each type of chair do we need? How many of each types of tablecloth do we need? Where do they need to be set up? What are they doing? How are we doing for utilities? How are people managing the bar and resources? All these other places, when they need to be set up, when they need to be broken down, when the next one needs to come in. How this entire event runs is on this banquet event form, and everybody gets a copy, right? Because it is time to get stuff done. So these specify the room layouts, decor, time of arrival, VIPs who might be in attendance, special attention required, bar times, cash or credit, times of meals, menus, service details. And the reason why, if you know that you're ever doing an event, the people putting on that event will bother you for counts of people, right? Like 6 months before, they're like, hey, about how many guests do you think you're gonna have? And you're like, oh, like 200. A week before, they're like, we need to know exactly how many. And you're like, 185. And they're like, if you have 186, we are going to freak out because we're ordering exactly enough for 185. And then you bring in 186. And then your banquet events manager is very disappointed in you, right? So why is my camera being weird? I don't know. I get easily distracted. So this is because it has to be on the banquet event form. Once we know exactly how many people there are, we can do the exact amount of hiring for it. We can do the exact amount of getting the right amounts of each plate set up. So this final number is typically required anywhere from about a week before for really big events to about 72 hours before for smaller events. So they can start making everything. So they can start setting up tables. So they can start figuring out menus and getting ingredients, right? And the catering coordinator is responsible for managing the office and controlling the functions diary. The function diary is just basically like ordered enough chicken, started the tablecloth laundry, blah, blah, blah. Kind of like what's going on. So we can refer to what's happening. That used to be something that was like physically passed out, but now we just use computer programs. Technology in the hotel and lodging industry is growing so fast. So the catering sales manager is sort of responsible for directing services in all these different functions, right? And a lot of what they do, they're not the banquet manager who's actually running around making sure everything's going through. The catering sales manager, they sort of supervise the catering. They make sure that everything's showing up. And then they work with the banquet chef and checking and make sure that the client's satisfied, and then work on billing them and collecting gratuities and passing out gratuities and all these other pieces. Whew. All right. So and there's lots of different types of catered events. Ones in which you might have a 3 or 4 course meal. I mean, I have them at almost every event I go to. And these are meetings, conventions, dinners, luncheons, weddings, corporate retreats, club meetings, things that are going to bring lots of people into a hotel with big meeting spaces and keep them there, right? So you might be wondering, why do we talk so much about room service? Like, this has got to make a ton of money. Why do we even offer room service when we can just have like banquets that pay a ton? It's because room service doesn't require you to set up a tablecloth. It doesn't require you to make sure that a table's available. It doesn't require you to have a waitress on staff or a waiter on staff. It doesn't require you to have a sommelier coming by. Room service is great because you can provide a desired service without having to pay for the operation portion, which means the profit margin is really high. That's why they like room service. Oh, okay. So let's think about sort of trends. How do we evaluate what's going on? How do we really think about what trends are here? Well, there's lots of trends right now happening that we're seeing in the food and bev world within hotels. For example, branded outlets, having a thing like a Starbucks in your hotel instead, or a Caribou Coffee instead of like whatever your mom and pop shop is. There are some hotels that actually have a Waffle House in it. Like those are the ones that I care about because that's real swag. But ones that might have different types of like Wolfgang Puck at some of the Ritz Carltons, or might have Bobby Flay's Burgers or something like that. Themed restaurants. So everybody's been to the chaotic hellscape that is Cheesecake Factory, with its like 60-page menu and no architecture that matches each other, and everything is insanity, right? These sorts of like themed restaurants actually originally grew out of hotels, and you see them as being very popular within hotels. There's still many hotels that have knockoff versions of rainforest cafes, that have submarine experiences, that have some sort of branded theme thing. That's been a huge trend in food and bev that kind of started to fizzle out in the early 2000s, but we're seeing a rise of again as people are feeling more going into these sort of branded events. Standardized menus. So instead of having every single one of your restaurants kind of doing its own thing, having one menu that might be equivalent across different hotels. Technology, being able, a game changer was the day that someone who was in the hotel bar could put down, this person tipped $5,000 and their favorite whiskey is X. And then all of a sudden, that was available to the front desk. And the front desk knew to treat these people well and give them a free valet. And then that also went to the salesperson who realized that this is a high roller and maybe they need to give them some sort of hotel perks so that they were going to come back. And then you have this repeat customer over time. Having the different functions and departments being able to talk to each other through the use of technology, game changer, absolute game changer, wonderful. We've also seen a lot of trends for healthier menu options. A lot of people, the original hotel restaurants were very French in style. And a lot of this was because of the French Revolution and a lot of the movements of chefs afterwards. And a lot of these chefs were very high-end chefs that started to work within hotels. It was French cuisine up until the mid-1900s, where it started to diversify a lot because it was just cheaper to be able to do certain types of things. But most food in hotels, this was supposed to be something that you didn't eat very often. So it was filled with butter, cholesterol, fat, everything else. We've seen a lot of change, especially with like business travelers like me. I'm out of town traveling for business like 60 plus days a year. Well, I think 40 this year, but most of them 60 plus days a year. Having like healthier options available for that level of frequent traveler is nice. And it's a newer trend that we're seeing in the food and bev world because they realize, wow, we have a bunch of hotel travelers who are very, very tired of eating pasta for the 60th night. Having more sustainable options. It turns out that Gen Z cares more about the environment than probably any generation before Gen Z. And now Gen Z starting to have the money to travel. So starting to think about like sustainability and marketing is a newer trend that we're seeing in the food and bev within hotels and lodging. And it's just so cool. So knowing the trends of your industry can kind of be the difference between being like the super hot spot for people to go to and the ones that are filled with regulars that are sad and in the corner drinking their same Shirley Temple drink, and telling their same story over and over, and there's the only people who come in. You don't want that, right? You want some recurring customers and you want some new customers. To be able to do this, you need to stay on top of trends and what's popular, right? So how do we evaluate trends? Well, we can think about it through lots of different ways. A few of the commonly used evaluation things that we use can think about like what's our food cost, what's our labor cost, what's our pour cost. For example, a food cost percentage is just the cost of the food divided by the amount of food sales, right? If it cost you $300 in ingredients and time and effort of your employees, and you sold that for $3,000, well, then your food cost percentage is 10%, right? Might be similar for labor costs. Let's think specifically on the labor cost. Well, if we're thinking about having like someone working for $35,000 a year, but it increases our food sales by 1.4 million, that might be a really good labor cost percentage. We also think about pour cost. Pour cost is called pour cost because it's basically just beverage cost, and it's related to how much it costs for like a pour of alcohol, so like 1.5 fluid ounces or typical shot. The reason why it's kind of geared towards this is because it's actually a fairly standardized measurement. So it makes it a little bit easier to understand like what's that cost per beverage versus beverage sales. And then capture rate. Out of all the hotel guests that you have, you probably want them to eat at your hotel, right? Hotels in Vegas, which provide basically everything you need and have no clocks and very confusing hallways so that you're not able to really get out, they have a very high capture rate. Like 75% of their hotel guests are actually going to dine there in some sort of outlet. While for a Hilton that maybe has a bar with like grilled cheeses, might have a capture rate of like 4%. So the idea of thinking like what percentage of your hotel guests are going to dine in the outlets within your hotel, this is something for us to realize on trends. So as we change things up, how do those numbers change? Oh, okay. Let's also think about room division. So the room division just means all the people connected to the room, right? So there's lots of different departments in hotels. We have a lot of the upper level management. We have sales and catering. We have food and bev. Then we have everybody kind of connected to rooms, which feels like a loose set of things, but they all come together. We're all going to bring this together. So the primary function of a hotel is to provide lodging. Yeah, it is really cool if you have a fancy restaurant, but it's still only going to be 26% of your sales on average, maybe 50% if you're in a really, really fancy place with like some sort of celebrity chef, but it's still going to be a smaller amount of your business. Most of the money that you're going to have coming in, with the exception of casino hotels, most of the money that you have coming in is going to be coming from rooms, right? And selling those rooms. So we need to think about what departments are involved in that process. So first we need to think about management structures and how they sort of differ between large, mid, and small size properties, right? Every single one of those is going to have a general manager, and they kind of set the tone for hiring. They need to be familiar with the cultures of the guests who stay there and with the preferences of the guests who stay there, and the hotels and the employees working within that hotel to make sure that there's a cohesive environment where guests and employees are both happy. Now, in a large resort hotel, this is going to be everything from the people managing the ski slopes all the way to the people who are in the housekeeping in 4 different divisions versus all the food and the dining and the options and the concierge. And in smaller properties, it might just be that you're dealing with housekeeping and you're dealing with the front desk and the night auditor. So the management structure is really going to differ depending on what size your property is. But no matter what, there's typically an executive committee. So these are the people who are going to get together and about every day, the first meeting of the day is going to be them sort of like planning out what's going on, and then they're going to break up and go do their own things. A lot of the time, this includes someone from human resources. If it is a smaller place, that is probably also the general manager, but most of the time, someone from human resources, someone from food and bev, someone from room division, someone from marketing and sales, someone from engineering, and someone from accounting, right? So someone who deals with the finances, someone who deals with fixing things that are broken because they need to be able to tell everybody else if something's broken, someone who's in charge of actually going out and marketing all the stuff and advertising and sales, someone who's in charge of like the rooms and how well those rooms are kept up, the food that people are going to eat, and making sure that the employees are happy. So a representative of those employees. Hello, cat. Yes, you're very cute. So let's think about sort of this room division. The room division director is the person who's in charge of all the people who are going to be contacting those customers on a regular basis or working within those rooms, right? So there needs to be efficient leadership. And this can be around a bunch of different departments who deal with rooms. This can be your front office, right? The people who are going to be there to be able to give out extra towels and be able to check you in and all these other things. This can be housekeeping. It can be the concierge, especially the nicer the hotel, the more that your guests expect out of that concierge, to have the password to all the best places, to have the in on being able to get a table at some exclusive event, the in to be able to get concert tickets. Concierges are a very important piece of this. Hello, Kat. Yes, you're wonderful. Here, say hello to the students. Hi, students. Okay. So the concierge is really important. Guest services, being able to like treat those guests and their needs fairly. Security, especially in high-end places, is kind of important. If you have Taylor Swift staying there or Beyonce staying there, they're going to want security. So things to think about are communications. How do you communicate with the rooms? How do you communicate in between these different departments? How do you communicate with guests? Is it an app? Is it having someone who's there to service them specifically? So main concerns of these departments are financial performance. They want to make money, right? Because rooms are your most money-making area. Then they're going to care about employee satisfaction, so making sure your employees are taken care of, guest satisfaction. The order in which they prioritize them is probably a sign on if you have a good manager or not. If they always put the guests first 100% of the time, may not be the best manager. If they always put the employees first at 100% of the time, maybe not the best manager. You got to have a balance of both, right? Guest relations, security, gift shop, stuff like that. All right, so let's go through what a couple of these are. Front office. The main duty of the front office manager, the person who is in charge of that front desk, is to make sure that guests' needs are met. So these are the ones who deal with check-in, check-out, other routine interactions, maybe extending a stay, reducing a stay, making sure that two friends have an adjoining room. Often the front desk is the nerve center of the hotel. And they're the ones who are able to call up the other departments and say, we just had this rich person come in who's very, very hungry, and they brought 12 friends, expect this in the kitchen, right? And stuff like that. Or being able to call housekeeping to be like, this person is allergic to our type of soaps. Please make sure to not use this type of soap. They are the people who are going to be the first point of contact for most guests. So the front office attempts to achieve 100% room occupancy. They want to sell their rooms, right? So they also work on upselling and yield management. So people come in and they're like, oh, that's great. You're not faced towards the beach. I can get you faced towards the beach for an extra $20. Those sorts of things, right? So that's sort of the front office. Then we have the night auditor. The night auditor is the mysterious Batman of the hotel world, right? Comes out at night, does their job, deals with a lot of money, stuff like that. So every single night, a hotel has to balance their accounts. This actually used to be way more important at a time where like banks and ATMs weren't as readily available. So hotels used to cash checks for travelers or traveler's checks, which meant that they really had to know how much money they had, how much money they didn't have, how much money was owed to them that they had to actually go get from the banks because they had lent the money to the customer, right? So they had to balance their accounts daily. Every night at about 1 a.m., you at 12 o'clock, everything shuts down. You get the little reports. At 1 a.m., someone who's called a night auditor takes those reports and the money and stuff and goes and gets locked into a room. Not really locked. I mean, you can leave it, there's a fire, but basically you're in there for like 6 hours. I actually applied for one of these jobs, got the job, and never did it because I didn't want to be locked in a room watching Netflix. Because there's no cell phone reception. But anyways, at approximately 1 a.m., when the hotel sort of like quieted down, the night auditor begins the task of like balancing the guest accounts. Who did what, where it comes from, who needs to be charged for what, and thinking about the receivables. The daily reports that they make are what everybody else runs off of. So the GM's going to really need the room occupancy percentage. They're really going to need all this other information to be able to do their jobs. And the night auditor provides these reports. All right, then we have security. Security is one of the highest reported concerns of guests who visit hospitality businesses. They want to make sure that this is safe, especially if they are a high value, rich guest, right? They really want to know that it is safe. So providing security at high end establishments, for example, for the car lot. If you park your nice car at the hotel, you would like to think that that car is not going to get broken into. Mine has been before, not at a good hotel. I probably wouldn't go back there. Security would be a concern, right? So these are things that help with guest peace of mind. If guests are not worried about things outside the hotel, they are more likely to spend money in your hotel. Then we have to think about reservations. So the reservation manager is the person who's sort of head of the reservations department. They talk to the room division manager. They deal with selling hotel rooms for a maximum amount of dollars while simultaneously exceeding guest expectations. They're dealing with, oh, you want to reserve a room? Okay, well, I have this one for $169 or I have this one for $259, but it's like way better. And also, you know what? 2 nights, you deserve a vacation. Let's do it for 3. And then make that experience as good as possible for those guests, right? Then there's guest services. So these are people who they deal directly with guests and are often the ones who can make or break impressions because they are the first people that people really interact with. Door attendants, so the person opening up the door of the nice hotel. Bell people, valet, concierge. These are really important for providing guest-specific services. And then concierge in itself, I already talked a little bit about this, but concierge assists guests in many different ways. Like, and you don't actually have to be staying at that hotel to use the concierge, by the way. Done this a million times where like I'll be in a city and like I want to get a table at like the best restaurant, or I want to be able to figure out movie times. I can just like walk into a hotel, walk up to their concierge and be like, hi, can you help me with X, Y, and Z? And like they will always help you because they don't check that you'd stay at that hotel. Anyways, concierge, they really focus on providing an experience of the city, right? So they arrange tickets to popular events and shows. They make reservations at restaurants. They provide advice on local activities. They reconfirm flights. They fulfill special requests such as shopping. I've had a concierge before where I was at an event where I had to present in a suit and I ripped the back of my suit. Like there was a hole and I was not about to go walk with a hole in the back of my suit in front of a whole bunch of people. So the concierge was nice enough to like send someone out to go buy a pair of pants in my size and deliver it to my room. Concierges are great, super cool, there to help you. So that's something to remember. Especially if you're just hanging out downtown and you want to be able to go to a nice show, go talk to the concierge. Anyways, so they're there to provide good guest experiences. Then the people who are probably the most important in a hotel, who get the most amount of just stuff piled on them and it's not fair, is housekeeping, right? Housekeeping, by far, every hotel, from your small itty bitty hotel that probably still has 4 or 5 housekeepers to your large hotels that might have hundreds. They have the largest number of employees in the hotel. They are led by the executive housekeeper, who's the head of the department, who every day will look and see what rooms need to be cleaned, what ones don't need to be cleaned, what the turnover is going to be, early check-ins, early check-outs, special needs, special requests, special accommodations, all these different sorts of things. And they have to figure it out and they have to mobilize lots of people very quickly. Right. In addition to scheduling and evaluation of employees, they also have to do inventory of guest rooms. They have to figure out like, hey, did anybody steal the hair dryers? Are there the remotes? Did anybody like walk away with this sort of stuff? Did anybody like hide things in different parts of the room because some people are crazy? They have to deal with so much of this, and they're also the ones who keep track of what's going on in the room. Like, the air conditioning doesn't seem to be working here. Hey, the paint's peeling, and they put together a lot of maintenance logs for the rooms for the maintenance department or engineering department is how we typically refer to them. Housekeeping is so vitally important, but also sometimes the least respected. But they work their butts off. And then there's laundry. So housekeeping and laundry are a lot of times actually 2 separate things. So most hotels actually do have their own laundry services. These are the ones where like you'll go in like a 3-star or above hotel, you'll go into the closet and there'll be a little bag. Most of the time you ignore the bag because the bag has price tags on it. But you pull out the price tags and it's like, pair of pants, $2, shirt, $1. These are laundry services. You can put stuff in the bag, mark off what's in the bag, and then they'll just charge a room for it, and they'll bring your clothes back in the morning like perfectly folded and pressed for you, right? So that's laundry. Laundry also deals with linens. They also deal with sheets and bathrobes and everything else that you can imagine. So most laundry operations computerize washing and drying and pressing and having like a little rotating conveyor belt. But that's not all hotels. Many smaller hotels contract out their laundry services, so they don't actually wash their own sheets or their own or like linens or anything. They send them out in bulk and they come back in bulk. So that's something important to know about. Okay, let's think about revenue management. Wow, we have so many words on this. I'm sorry. It's just there's just so much to talk about, and there was no real way to make it prettier. All right, for revenue management, this is what we use to try to maximize room revenue. We want to think about supply and demand, right? Oh, right there. You should be thinking about your price and your quantity and thinking all about the wonderful things that we have back in your principles of microeconomics, which is one of my favorite classes to teach, to be honest. And thinking about, well, as price goes up, the amount that people demand goes down. But as price goes up, the amount that we want to sell goes up because those are good prices, right? So balancing that demand and supply, this is how we try to think about how can we sell every room at the highest possible price for that room. And if we can't sell at the highest possible price, what's the next best thing we can do? Is it that we sell 80 rooms at $100 each, or do we drop it down to $90 and sell 120 rooms? Thinking about those sorts of situations and how we react to them, this is revenue management, and it make or breaks hotels. If you do not know supply and demand, and you end up trying to charge way too much money and get nobody in your rooms, or you are going way too cheap and you can't actually afford to pay your employees, that is what drives most hotels that go out of business easily. Is poor revenue management. So understanding supply and demand is probably one of the most important parts that you could possibly do in a hotel. Revenue is available per room. We call this RevPAR. This sort of language was developed by STARS. So it's the Smith Travel Research, HTOR.com. You can go like explore around it. They were some of the early ones who started actually developing systems and equations to think about room division. A lot of the principles of room division here that are very important to remember is that supply is inelastic. You have a set number of rooms, and any rooms you do not sell, you do not make money on. And being able to bring that into an equation when we start to think about supply and demand. Well, supply and demand, we normally say, oh, well, nobody paid for this bag of apples. Well, the bag of apples will be there tomorrow. Rooms aren't the same. So it requires kind of its own treatment of supply and demand. So this is how we've developed many of the important metrics that we think about in hotel, right? Like such as room occupancy. How many rooms are occupied versus how many are available? Is it a good rate? Is it a bad rate? How do we think about room revenue versus rooms sold? So how much money are we actually making versus the amount of rooms that are sold? What's the average amount that we are getting, or the average daily revenue? RevPAR. RevPAR is just like the room revenue, the amount of money that we are making divided by the number of rooms available. Like these are things that we need to think about all the time because we need to balance or try to figure out how do we maximize that total revenue? Because it could be that our prices is so high we don't actually have anybody, so our revenue is low. But as we lower those prices, revenue will actually go up because we'll attract in people. But then we'll get to a point where we have the maximum amount of people at the maximum amount of price. And if we continue to lower the price, we're not really gaining all that many more people. The amount of people that you have for $50 rooms versus $45 rooms, not really different. Your hotel is going to be full, right? So then you might be losing revenue as you continue to drop prices. Where is the sweet spot price? Where's the sweet spot price that maximizes your demand for that price to maximize total revenue? That is what the STAR system starts to teach us. So there's lots of additional considerations that we also need to think about because you still have to pay stuff for your room even when you do not sell that room, right? You still need to keep the lights on and the minibar stocked, and you need to have the smoke detectors working and the locks working and have the guest amenities in there. You still need to have the little soapy soaps in there even when nobody's staying in there. So thinking about some of this and how we can adjust some things such as like non-essential equipment, like turning off the power to the locks on rooms that aren't being used at the time during peak billing cycles. Things like this is how we've had like this sort of minute approach to revenue management that helps us really make differences. For example, turning off the power to a lock for a room that's not being used doesn't seem to matter for one hotel. But what if you have 53, I mean, we have 53,000 hotels in the world. We have 5 million rooms. Let's say that like 4% of those rooms aren't used up, right? We're talking about like 40,000 rooms worth of electricity for a key lock. That's saving a lot of money. So thinking about revenue systems is really important. We also have things called call accounting systems. These are systems that can track guest rooms charges. These aren't as important now. because only old people use phones in hotel rooms. But it used to be that, especially for business guests who were traveling, they didn't have cell phones, right? Pre like late 90s, the average person did not have a cell phone. What they did was they made local calls to whoever they were staying with or whoever they were meeting with and stuff from their hotel room, and needed a way to be able to account like how much is long distance versus not long distance and charge the guests that. So they had the call accounting system. There's also guest reservation systems. I'm sure that you know all about this because booking.com, booking.yeah, right? So there's lots of different ways that you can book a hotel room. The airline industry was actually the first to start using global distribution systems for reservations, where you could go online and like book your Delta flight. That was a huge deal, right? But this global distribution system, as it became more affordable, we started to see it in all the other pieces of travel. We started to see it in hotel, car rentals, attraction booking. Now we have centralized reservation systems. So a lot of these centralized reservation systems are when you have one central management system that might be in charge of lots of different things. So let's say you have a conference or a convention or something, and you're able to deal with some of those tickets while also dealing with your rooms, while also dealing with the people who are going to be staying in and eating in your restaurants, or who's going to be dealing in lounges. Being able to have all those systems talk to each other is so important. So these centralized reservation systems, they can be used as a marketing tool. For example, if you're going into town, do you go to the hotel that if someone who's independently owned that you've never heard anything about, or do you go to Hilton? A lot of time you go to a Hilton because it's something that you're used to. You already know what the marketing chain's like. You already have the hotel app where you get your little points so that every night, 8 nights you stay somewhere, you get 2 free, right? As long as you're maximizing your points. These provide information on hotels and can be used in several areas of hotel business, and they're really important for getting guests in through the door. We also need to think about how do we bill guests, because you know you've probably not given proper respect to the fact that on the last day of your vacation, you wake up probably too late to actually make the breakfast bar. Or if you do make the breakfast bar, like good for you, but you're grabbing something quick in your pajamas and getting back to your room. And then you're packing up all your stuff, and then you start to leave out. And then you notice that a piece of paper was slipped underneath your door. And that piece of paper, most of the time, will have a balance of 0 because you almost never charge stuff at hotels, at least if you're me, who does a lot of business travel, because business or my job does not does not pay for hotel food. But if you start to go through, and it'll tell you like, oh, I've paid this much for newspaper, this much for laundry, this much for dining that I charged to the room, this much for other stuff that I charged to the room, this much for the snorkeling excursion that I ended up charging to the room. And this bill with all those different pieces from all those different departments, oh, game changer. Because billing, that used to have to be done by hand. That's what the night auditor used to do. Is it used to take all these different accounts and balance the accounts and then write out these bills and then give you the bills. Now technology can do it in an instant. It's been tracking you the entire time, and that is so freaking cool, right? So billing has become much more efficient as technology has drastically improved. And the fact that we have these point management systems, which make it so that large hotels can track these transactions for guests. Oh my God, that's just so cool. So even looking at that little piece of paper that slipped under your door that you might just be rolling your suitcase over, there was hundreds of years of development of tradition and systems to be able to make that possible for you. So anyways, these are just some of the things that I find kind of interesting. That's hotel and lodging. You know what? Go ahead and do your assignments, and we're going to come back to this. This isn't the last time you heard about hotels. It might be module 1. We have conventions and expos in a few weeks. So don't worry, you'll be hearing about a lot of this again. For right now, enjoy the rest of your day and have a good one. Bye.